full moon now is going to be happening tomorrow in sidereal Libra. See, the sun is at 21:58 of Aries, and the moon is at 21:46 here of Libra. This is around 8:15 p.m. Pacific time. So here on the Pacific coast where I live, we'll get a great view of this gigantic, super moon, because you see it's going to be rising right at the time of the new moon. Of the full moon, which is the culminating point. So the moon is closer to the Earth, this super moon, at any other time this year at this moment. So here on the West Coast, we'll really get to see it because it'll be happening right as the moon is rising. It'll be closest to the Earth, so it should be really amazing. Looking forward to seeing that on Saturday night. So, what we have here on Purnima, the full moon, it's the harmonizing point of the Aries cycle. So we're in the Aries cycle because that's when sun and moon came together. Talked about the Aries cycle a couple weeks ago, asserting our individuality, our individual clarity and power, and the sun is exalted. So it's very much about, handling responsibility, handling pressure, stepping up in that way. Now, one cool thing, Mercury just moved into Aries on Saturday, so you see on Friday it's still debilitated, so thank the Lord Mercury's finally not debilitated anymore. Whew, it seems like it's been forever. So Mercury on Saturday goes into Aries, so we should be feeling like we're moving fast and moving forward and thinking more clearly on Saturday, especially from the previous couple of days when Mercury was hanging out at those last degrees of Pisces, and just like it seems forever that Mercury went into Pisces because it went retrograde there and then went forward again. So it's been there since like early February, or early March rather. And so Mercury is in Aries. This is one thing about the full moon, and it's also, moon is opposite Jupiter, because Sun and Jupiter are very close together in Aries, and so we have this moon. Saturn is at a wide orb. It's still in the same sign as Saturn, but it's opposite. It's pretty far away at this point, about 20 degrees away from Saturn. But it's interesting because the moon has just passed over Saturn. So even though it's tempting to say, well, it's not really joined Saturn, it's a wide orb, we get too much into the orbs are important, of course, especially when you're making specific predictions. You'll often hear, and especially with Western astrology, because that's really where their timing comes from the exact orbs of the planets, so they're very precise with that, even more so than Vedic astrology. But those specific orbs are important if you're making a prediction. But a wider orb, like when you're looser with the orb, it still shows the feeling. You're not necessarily making a prediction based on it, but you're saying, and especially in this case, the moon just passed over Saturn. So this full moon, even though it's wider from Saturn than it was, it's not right on Saturn, but the moon has just passed over Saturn. So we're feeling the effects, that full-on emotional effect, because the moon just went over Saturn. So you'd make a prediction based on a tighter orb, but the looser orb is good for at least telling how we're feeling and what the energy is in general. So this Aries cycle of individuality is being balanced with the Libra cycle of compromise and considering another person's views. What happens with the full moon is we become full of what that feels like. Because we're still acting from a place of the sun cycle. We're still in the Aries cycle as far as action, and the energetic movement that we're putting forward in life is still around Aries. But what happens is we need to balance the polarity, and that's with every situation. The Aries polarity is about asserting our individuality, acting with personal inspiration and courage, and it can often be a bit reckless. It can be not think before we do something or say something. This is the nature of Aries. And so we've been in that sort of think first, or that sort of act first, think later mentality for a couple weeks with this, when Sun and Moon came into Aries. Now, what happens with the full moon is a sort of culmination of, or certain situations work to a head, and then we feel what that's like. So we're feeling what the Aries nature, what's the result of that Aries nature? What's it really feel like? Because the reflection comes back from others, Libra. So we may be feeling how, for instance, impatient we are, reckless we are, inability to like sit and be still with something instead of just like acting mindlessly, or how irritable we can be when things don't go our way. This is the nature of Aries, the sort of negative quality of Aries. But also we've seen how much courage we've had, how much inspiration we have, how individually motivated we are to really take it on and be individually powerful. Now we're getting a reflection back, like from others, that says, okay, here's what that looks like. And we don't actually, so we have to harmonize the individual expression, the individual courage and clarity and drive, which is Aries, with its repercussions, with its consequences. And Libra is very much about consequences. This is why Saturn is exalted. Libra is very much why Saturn is exalted in Libra. Saturn is really about feeling the stress and the pressure of our consequences. Saturn is like the heaviness of the consequences, but Libra is where we, of course, balance is the big word, but it's where we have the potential to make an adjustment. And we're going to be reckless when we're powerful, courageous, like let's say like an entrepreneur or a person who is motivated and inspired to do something. We're going to break a few eggs sometime. But all can be forgiven when we break a few eggs or when we act with will, which is Aries, which is the negative quality of Aries, to break a few eggs or to step on some toes, as long as when the reflection comes back, which is Libra, we slow down and we go and we consider the other person, the other people, and the results of our perhaps self-willed nature. We can be forgiven. They'll forgive us, and in fact, they can even respect us for having the courage to go, and this is how the Aries lesson is learned, and what Aries has to teach is that, sometimes you just need to get in there and take action. And this is a powerful Aries time right now. We have the Sun exalted in Aries. We have Jupiter in Aries. That's why I said a couple weeks ago, now has been the time, the last couple weeks, for you to really take it on. And if you haven't taken it on, you're going to be frustrated. This is the Aries lesson. And so again, if we're not taking it on, this Libra full moon is going to show where we're aware that, because perhaps what's coming back from others is you're not powerful enough, you're not confident enough, you need to be more assertive, because this full moon in Libra is like a sort of perhaps clinginess, or we become aware that we are wanting the power of and the inspiration of the others to like guide us and teach us. This is the kind of negative Libra quality that gets hung up in indecision, trying to make everyone happy. And so, this is why the harmonizing point of Libra is also Aries. But we have to get it right. This isn't starting a Libra cycle where we're now learning to harmonize. No, we're learning the Aries lesson, which is to act with individuality. But in order to do that in a way that is balanced and that isn't imbalanced toward this kind of militant individualism, we need to also consider the way our individual self-will affects others and influences others. Because otherwise, this is what we do it for, even in the Aries principle. Aries wants to accomplish things and achieve things and pursue things with great, gusto and courage. But the reason they do it, I'm not talking about Aries people, I'm talking about the Aries energy. The reason we act through that nature is because we want to do things that are meaningful to others. It doesn't mean that we have no interest in that. It's not the part of us that's not interested in others. Everything about life is interested in others. Aries is also interested in others. It's a secondary concern with the Aries lesson. The primary concern with the Aries lesson is my individual inspiration and the kind of no limits, no boundaries approach to life, which says I can do it. Nothing holds me back. I have the courage to just do what I want to do. That's Aries. And it's a beautiful thing. But what can happen is it can be too extreme. and bring suffering upon himself, because Aries will suffer, like everybody will suffer, or the Aries principle in us will suffer if it's not harmonized with the needs of others and those people in our life that teach us a lot that we need to learn from. We need to slow down and consider the repercussions of our actions. So, of course, this is also a big relationship axis, because Aries is the individual and Libra is the reflection that comes back and the need to compromise and harmonize. So our relationships are really getting tested as well. This has been a big test since a couple weeks ago with that new moon in Aries. It's been a time to really stake out. We've in our relationships, we've really had the opportunity to stake out an individual claim and say, okay, we're in a partnership, but this is how I am beyond the partnership. This is how I want to function as an autonomous being. And we're evaluating things like our relationships that might be making us weak. This is why the Aries is somewhat difficult for romantic relationships, because it's more about our individual inspiration. But again, the full moon in Libra is very much about maintaining that connection. And so we're sort of backing up again and going, okay, is this valuable to me? Do I really want this? Is this worth compromising for? So, the reason Saturn is exalted in Libra is because Libra is very much about being able to make an adjustment and to connect with the social implications of our, perhaps, reckless nature. And this is good for Saturn, because Saturn is where we feel the consequences of our mistakes. And, Libra is very much where we can correct them and we can make them better. Nothing makes something better than an apology, or than just coming down off of that, like, certainty. I know I'm right and you're wrong and it was supposed to be this way and blah, 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 blah. This is where Aries can get kind of, way too far. Considering the other person and saying, I can tell, that you do love me, and I can feel that the words you're saying, and, you are maybe trying to help me for my own good, and my sort of, no limits attitude about nothing's going to hold me back is really it's just too far. It's because I'm not, thinking straight here, and I need to chill out and pay attention to others in my life who have been there for me, and things like that. So it's a big harmonizing force right now, hopefully. And what happens is if we don't learn the lesson, then what can happen if we have a lot of Aries energy, or wherever the polarity is, we can be one extreme or the other. Okay, for a hyper-masculine person, then we're going to be getting feedback from others that says you need to compromise a little bit now. And how are we going to handle that? Are we going to allow ourselves to be extended? Because that's really what's coming out now, is we need to allow ourselves to be extended. It doesn't mean we have to say that we're wrong or that we're going to actually change our mind about something, but we can meet a person, let's say if we've decided even to break something off or whatever, we can meet them in a more humane place, in a more dignified and honoring place, which is Libra. Now the nakshatra is Vishaka, which is ruled by Jupiter, and the deities are Indra and Agni. It's really one of the big, mighty nakshatras. It's Indra was the king of lightning, or the king of the gods and the god of lightning, and Agni the god of fire. And so it's a very motivated nakshatra, Vishaka, and so there could be a lot of like big kind of thunderous ideas. It's kind of related to Thor. It kind of reminds me of that. That's what this one is about. Like the god Thor with the hammer and stuff. So it's very idealistic and big duties and responsibilities, a lot of like social, especially social pressure, social reform, big crusading energy, wanting to do big things. That's what this nakshatra is about. So it's actually very good for that. People who have several planets in Vishaka will, if you have several planets there, you'll have that kind of nature. You've all seen me through these things. I actually have my moon there. So, so it gives me a kind of a crusading nature, I guess you would say. And so it's that kind of a energy. So, there could be a potential to be sort of this is a quality of Libra that is actually more interested in, even in things like social reform and, judgment and, things that are larger humanistic principles are here. But it can be kind of fervent and kind of, a bit dogmatic. And so we have to be careful of a sort of dogmatism right now, especially if we feel like we're serving some big purpose, we might be a little bit jacked up on that. And again, the full moon is where we're full of our emotions. And, this is a big one. This is a sun cycle in Aries, and the moon is close to debility. The moon is close to debilitation. This is not the place where the moon is really that powerful. Moon is not really that powerful. So, 2.5 weeks, or 2 weeks or so, when we have the new moon, the moon's going to be more powerful. So this is the way it happens. The sun is really powerful in the Aries cycle, and then the moon becomes really powerful in the Taurus cycle. So we start with the powerful sun cycle because sun is exalted in Aries, and then the next one, when sun and moon come together next time, they're going to come together in Taurus. That's where the moon is exalted. So right now we're getting this sun, like I'm individually powerful. It's the origin. It's the transcendent, non-localized power. This month, and then next month, it's going to be Sun, Moon come together in Taurus. So we're trying to harmonize that energy right now. So the Sun, Moon come together in Taurus next month, but then the full moon is in Scorpio. So we'll talk about that next month. But so I hope this was helpful with the Aries Libra polarity. And now I'm going to do the forecast for my members, which is a forecast for all 12 signs. If you want to hear your forecast, you can hear it for just 1 penny and get a 2-week membership to my member site, where you not only get to hear the full and new moons as it relates to your sign each month, but also 4 forecasts per week, at least about an hour or so of forecasts each week, and then a bunch of classes and all kinds of stuff. I have close to 100 members that get this all the time, so they can stay in tune with the cosmic weather patterns all the time. You're busy, so it's nice for you to just be able to plug into this and know that somebody is, keeping you in tune with those things. But, I hope you enjoyed this forecast.